What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning into this video here on Elvis is the Man. Now this video is going to be talking about Elvis's 70s women, or the women that Elvis dated, was married to, engaged to in the 70s. Now the 70s were like probably my favorite time period, and judging from the other Elvis fans that I correspond with and talk to, that's pretty much the general census. The 70s were the most interesting time period. Now Elvis, for lack of a better term, went through a lot of women in the 70s. No disrespect to them, but Elvis just was the kind of guy who needed that emotional comfort, probably stemming from being so close with his mom and losing his mom at such a young age. Elvis just needed that type of comfort and support. He wanted a girl with him all the time. Now, starting in 1970, Elvis was still married to Priscilla Presley. They finalized their divorce in October '73, and Priscilla went to Elvis and told him about the separation and what she wanted to do in February 1972 when Elvis was in Las Vegas. As you can notice, starting from Elvis on tour in April, that he started to look not so good, started to have a little more trouble with his weight, a little more trouble with medication. Some people say, yeah, that's just because he loved Priscilla so much and he couldn't. I think it was more the change in his life. He had to adjust to a lot of new things. It was a big life change. He got divorced. Lisa wasn't there all the time. He didn't have that comfort at home because Elvis wanted a wife to be at home. He had a more traditional type view of marriage and all that, which was one of the reasons why they didn't work out. I think they were the least compatible. Elvis needed a woman in his life that understood him. Priscilla didn't support Elvis like in his spirituality. She didn't understand his Southern roots of having a wife at home and church on Sunday, even though Elvis couldn't go. The type of Southern cooking. She didn't get it. She was living in Memphis. She wasn't like that. That wasn't her thing. And I think Priscilla was more career oriented, just like Aunt Margaret actually, but that was in the 60s. And she just didn't vibe with Elvis.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone that carries a famous name is carrying a burden on their shoulders. And carrying the name of Presley has been absolutely...
Priscilla is my least favorite out of this bunch, just because she comes off to me as like more cold-hearted towards Elvis. Now, I can't really prove that. It's just how the perception, the feeling I get when I watch interviews of her, when I've read her book, Elvis and Me. She just comes across as not that sweet type that Elvis needed. Not to talk bad about Lisa's mother, but that's just the feeling I get. I don't like how she started to use Elvis's last name after he died. I don't like how she still uses it. I do like how she did open up Graceland in 1982. I think that was good for the fans and for Elvis's image and legacy. And there were a lot of reports by, the Memphis Mafia and others saying that Elvis really felt pressure to marry Priscilla and that he didn't actually want to go through with it. I'm reading a book by one of Elvis's cooks saying that, she found him crying just before he was gonna marry Priscilla, and she asked, "Why are you crying?" And he says, because I have to marry Priscilla, I don't want to do it. And she's like, well, if you don't want to do it, why are you doing it? He's like, I have to. Some reports say that, Colonel was pressuring Elvis to marry Priscilla because she had been with him for so long. And if Elvis wasn't going to put a ring on it, then he needed to, either get rid of her or, hurry up and marry her, because it would not be good for his image to have a live-in girlfriend, for so long. And Priscilla was 21 at the time when they got married, so it was the right time. And also, I believe Priscilla's dad was pressuring Elvis because Elvis made certain promises to her dad saying he'll take care of her, he planned to marry her, and Elvis could have looked bad if negative press got out about that whole situation. Now, the second lady in Elvis's life comes in 1971, Joyce Bova. Elvis met her in 1969 in Las Vegas, and I recently read her book just a little while ago, Joyce Bova's, and I really, really enjoyed it. Joyce Bova worked in Washington, and Elvis had a fetish for law enforcement and badges, and he was really intrigued with her profession, but they lived far apart. So Elvis would come out to see her, she'd come out to see Elvis. This was before their divorce from Priscilla, his divorce from Priscilla. And, so he had to keep it on the down low. She called on the secret phone. There was a code word for Joyce, to know that she was on the line. I like the spark that she gave Elvis in late 1971. He was becoming a bit, bored with performing in Vegas. And, he was on a short tour in November 1971. And he was just totally amped up performing as only he could, because Joyce Bova for the Baltimore show and her family were in the audience, and he wanted to give them a great show. And fortunately, we have some great fan footage of those concerts. An interesting thing about the relationship with Joyce Bova is she claims in her book that she was pregnant with Elvis's child, and she had an abortion without ever letting Elvis know that she was pregnant. She says that she was scared that Elvis wouldn't, be interested in her anymore. She says that she would rather have an abortion and give up the baby than risk losing Elvis. Now, she says this all in her book. Now, the relationship did end by Joyce because she couldn't handle Elvis's drug taking. It was too stressful for her. She saw a lot of things that she didn't want to see, and she didn't want to be a part of it. So she ended up going her own separate way. She did see Elvis again, she says, in the summer of 1975. She went to Las Vegas and saw him without Elvis even knowing. And she was so just appalled at Elvis's appearance. That was the last time that she saw him, and she was really upset by it. Now comes to my favorite Elvis girlfriend, and that was Linda Thompson. July 1972, out of all the ones he had in his life, to me, she was the best match for Elvis, and a lot of people in Elvis's inner circle believe the same. She was from the South, she was Miss Tennessee. They had a lot in common. They were both into God. She understood Elvis, she got Elvis. There was a big difference in age, but they just vibed. And I feel like she was the one out of all of them that probably loved Elvis most, in my opinion. Like I said, they met in 1972 in July, right after Elvis got done with Madison Square Garden and that tour over the summer. Elvis was in good shape, in good spirits. He was at the Memphian where they met. And I feel like she was most attentive towards Elvis. Now, I feel that she was best suited for Elvis. She was the most attentive towards him when it came to watching him, especially when things got bad in the later 70s. In Elvis's late 30s with the drug problem. She would watch him all the time, not even go to sleep until she felt Elvis was good. A few times she caught him choking on something as he'd go to sleep on his sleep pills. Like one time there was an apple cord that she had to pull out of his throat, and some other things. I feel like she was best suited for Elvis, like I said, as far as their personalities. I feel that she really loved Elvis for Elvis. Like she says in her book that she would just watch him and gaze at him as he was asleep. She would just look at him like, wow, look at this guy. She would also go to every show that Elvis went to. Elvis often told her, you don't have to come to every show, you can do other things. But she said, no, I want to stay and watch this, because she wanted to cheer him on. She would always root for him to hit the notes as he would sing, and she was just awesome. Every time I watch her interviews, I always get the vibe like she's very warm, loving, caring, a sweet, genuine person. Now, between their relationship in July 1972 and the later end of 1976, Elvis dated a few more women off and on, behind Linda's back. Like I said earlier, Elvis didn't want to be alone, and if Linda wasn't ever on a tour with Elvis, or if he left her behind, sometimes he'd have someone waiting for him, or generally always he'd have somebody waiting for him in Vegas or on tour. Some of these people were Sheila Ryan, Sybil Shepherd, Diane Goodman. These people Elvis was pretty familiar with, but he didn't have long-lasting relationship with them. They were more like a fling, even though they came along with them, on occasion. Now, when Linda would catch word that Elvis was with other women, he would always deny it, or he'd say basically when he couldn't get out of it, they mean nothing to me, and, I love you. And she believed it because, like I said earlier, she said the same thing, that, Elvis was he needed a woman around him for emotional comfort, and not that he was really emotionally cheating on her. And she believed it because she just really understood and got Elvis, but eventually it got too much. So now we get to November 1976. I also like this because When Elvis really got emotionally happy, he'd give better shows. And he was in a new relationship with Ginger, and he gave great shows in December in Las Vegas and even better ones on the road in late December 1976. We all know about December 30th, Atlanta, we know Pittsburgh, New Year's Eve. He gave great shows because he was so excited about his new relationship with Ginger. Now, there was some problems with that relationship because I believe it was because of their age difference. I'm reading the book by Dr. Nick called The King and Dr. Nick. Dr. Nick says Elvis was very insecure about his relationship with Ginger, and he didn't understand why she didn't want to be on the road with him all the time and why she seemed to be a little more independent. He says that she would be gone when Elvis woke up in the morning. She didn't always want to go on tour with him. When she did go on tour, a lot of times she wanted her family to be there, like in Las Vegas. Elvis didn't like the fact that she didn't always want to be like on him like a blanket all the time. You know, she was more independent, and Elvis was very insecure about that. Dr. Nick even says that he had his security watch her to see if was she cheating on me or what. And she says, Dr. Nick says that, you know, he didn't like that in Elvis, but at that point in his life, maybe he was a little more insecure. And I remember even in the documentary series Elvis, All the King's Men, where the Memphis Mafia would talk about Elvis throughout his life. I remember Marty Lacker says that there was problems with that relationship in some areas, and Marty told him basically, you know, she's a lot younger than you. She wants to go to the clubs and this and that, but you know, you're 41, 42, and you've been there, done that. That doesn't interest you anymore. She doesn't want to stay home. And so Elvis kind of went through a lot of emotional energy. Now, Elvis was reportedly engaged to Ginger at his time of death. I believe it was January when he proposed to her. Some people dispute this, but I think it's probably true. Elvis took one of the diamonds from his TCB ring and had an engagement ring made from it and proposed to her in his bathroom. Now, a lot of people have said that, you know, if Linda was with Elvis the day Elvis died, Elvis would still be here. And, you know, I think that's unfair to Ginger because, you know, she was young and she wasn't, you know, she was asleep when the incident happened. Judging from the books I've read on death of Elvis, it was like an instantaneous death and she couldn't have done anything to save him. And I think that's a lot to put on somebody. What actually I found that happened was that Elvis's aides were told reportedly by Elvis, you know, to leave me alone. Elvis told him, leave me alone, don't bother me, I'm gonna be in my bathroom. And his aides weren't checking on him. If his aides would have been checking on him, you know, maybe they could have caught him after it happened. Like I remember in the book I just did a review on, that the maids heard a loud thud around like 9, 10 a.m., but they were instructed not to check, or else maybe they would have. I just think it's too much to put on one person. You can't point the blame on anybody. It has to be put on Elvis or maybe the natural causes, things that were out of his control. Now, Ginger came out with a book that I really, really like. I definitely recommend it. It's probably in my top 3 Elvis books. She talks, like I couldn't put it down. It's been a while since I've read it, so I can't remember every single point. I probably will reread it and give a review of it. But like she really shows that Elvis wasn't so depressed in 1977 as maybe we believed, that he was actually in better spirits than we've thought. And also I remember her saying that Elvis, like I talked about in Elvis's Last Vacation in May 1977, or March, that he wasn't actually as overweight as what we thought. It was just a lot of water retention. The suits weren't flattering to him. But that was a good book, and I really recommend you all check it out. And another thing about the books, like sometimes we have books that contradict what other people have said. Oh, which one's true? That's true, that's true. You know, maybe it could be that, you know, most of it is true, but it's like Elvis had his relationship with Linda, and then he had his relationship with the guys. Well, Elvis would act different towards his girlfriend than he would around the guys. So Elvis would tell a girlfriend something, and then he'd go and say something to the guy, and it could both be true, but it'd just be different emotions that Elvis was having. And then they all write their books, and then we have conflicting stories about different issues when they could all be true somewhat, but just different perspectives. Like in the Bible, you have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Some people think oh, they're contradicting each other, but they're just given different points of view on the same story as they see it. So anyway, I hope you've liked this little rundown of some of Elvis's, the biggest relationships that he had in the 70s. If you did, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and also hit the notification button so you never miss a video. It's right by the subscribe option underneath the channel name. So we'll talk to you guys next time.